The Fujifilm xf35mm 1.4R, the original one, is arguably the Fujifilm lens with the strongest legacy, or the biggest reputation, you could say, but it's also one of the smallest lenses. And it's a lens that I have a lot of respect for, but I haven't really found this personal connection with it yet. I've only owned it for about 5 years, 5-6 years maybe, and it's the first Fujifilm lens that I ever bought, but it's also been in my pack a lot as sort of an alternative lens. I'm more of a 23mm, a classic 35mm kind of guy. So it's not that often that I use it, but I have a lot of respect for it. But I'm also really interested in hearing from people who own this lens for 13, 14 years or something, and really try to get in under the metal skin of this lens and see what's inside there.
Yeah, so that's me. My name is Palle Schultz, and I'm from Copenhagen, and connected to Fujifilm Nordic in Stockholm. Skal jeg bare gå op på det her kamera her?
Ja.
35, hvad kalder man det på engelsk? Hvad siger man?
35.4, det tror jeg faktisk.
Okay, this is my preferred lens. It's always the lens I go back to, and now I've been giving the task to try to explain why. And when it's an emotion, you don't really know why, so I had to think about it. So the quality of this lens, the aesthetics of it, is that it's very sharp when it's in focus, and then it's very nicely blurred out outside that focus. And the in-between from sharp to unsharp is, I think, where the magic lies. Also, in technical terms, it's a crop 53mm on these cameras as a crop, but compression-wise, it's still a 35 and will always be a 35 no matter what you put it on. So you have sort of two contradicting measures where you need to frame it with the crop, but also have to move with the compression. And what I think is amazing about this 35 is that it is still compression-wise so wide-angled that you can sort of manipulate a little bit how people look when you make portraits of them. So you can use it subtly to shape people's faces in a little way just by angle and pose, and that makes it very effective. And also for a full body shot lens is really good because you don't have to move too far away to get a full body shot or a half body shot. So and still keep a really nice compression, so to say, which means you don't look weird. But when it comes to this, it's sort of an in-between, a very subtle in-between, where it doesn't distort too much, and especially with portraits and people, it is by far the lens I want to use.
My name is Jonas Dyhr Rask. I've been collaborating with Fujifilm for many years now. The journey started with the X100 for me, the original one in 2011. But then I bought the X Pro 1, and with it the xf35mm 1.4. And that actually kind of changed my life. I think the first time that I really noticed that there was something special about that lens was probably the first image that I took with it. It has this undefinable quality that I've never come across in any lens at any camera system ever. It has this very refined sharpness, yet very subtle, undefined not sharpness. And the gradation between in-focus and out-of-focus areas is something that is very unique to this lens. I think my most creative work that I've done over these past 12 years have all been with the xf35 1.4. It is the lens that I always bring with me.
Another thing is that I used this lens for MMA and cage fighting. Shooting cage fighting, you need to get rid of the fence in front of you, else the fence will take over. Sometimes you can use the fence as sort of an aesthetic, but mostly you want to get rid of it so you can actually see what's going on inside the ring. And the 1.4 is perfect for that if you put it all the way up against the fence. But also if you drag back about 70 centimeters, the center part will be see-through and where the fence around it will be visible. So you get sort of a framing. So you can do a lot of stuff with this.
I'm heading off to a music festival to meet Malene VInge, a music photographer that I admire a lot, and I know she has a lot of history with the 35mm. So I'm here to get her point of view on the lens.
Jeg havde godt læst og hørt om 35'erne, så får jeg tilbudt at låne en af en flink fyr ude fra Silkeborg. Og da jeg aftalte med ham, at jeg skal låne det her, så ligesom folk, de griner lidt, fordi det første fik, det er gratis. Og så lånte jeg hans i en 14 dages tid, og jeg kunne godt se, at den kunne noget helt vildt fantastisk fedt, netop i forhold til koncertfoto på mindre spillesteder. Så da jeg måtte aflevere det tilbage, så endte jeg med at købe et brugt et. Så den har fulgt mig i mange år. Jeg tror, de første 2-3 år, jeg havde den før jeg fik 16-55'eren, der boede den på. Jeg havde den stort set aldrig af. Den var der på konstant. Ja, den er måske ikke verdens hurtigste i autofokus, men nogle gange så tænker jeg, når det lige er koncertfotos, og lyset det er dårligt, og det er mindre spillested, så er det også gerne musik, der støjer, og derfor må billedet også gerne støje lidt. Fordi jeg har fotograferet rigtig meget død, kan man sige, også metal. Ja. Og der bliver jo headbanget og smidt rundt med hår, og det kan gå rigtig stærkt, men så er der selvfølgelig en masse skud, der ikke virker, men der er også nogen, og når den rammer, og den sidder der, så er den perfekt. Ja. Her er det Wiki, der er spillet inde på Northside. En sen aften, nat måske, og der var stort set ikke noget lys. Det lys, der var, det var strobe, og det blinkede, og det skiftede konstant, både i farve og i styrke. Og så var der rigtig meget røg, og jeg tænkte bare, shit, det her, det kommer aldrig til at gå godt. Men så havde jeg heldigvis valgt 35'eren, for han spillede også på en lille bitte scene, sådan en slags blokvogn nærmest, hvor man også kommer tæt på, og scenen, den er lav. Og så lykkedes det simpelthen alligevel at få nogle ret, synes jeg selv, fede skud. Det er ikke det klassiske koncertfoto, men der er kommet en del ud af det, som jeg faktisk er ret glad for. Ja.
Hej så. Skal I med til Sivas?
Ja, tak.
Fedt.
Så nu er
Ja.
okay, så kan vi bare tage en pause.
Skal vi trykke på råd? Nej, det.
I've actually already worn one down, and I'm now on my third lens. I actually have 2 backups at home. So it's definitely the lens that I like the most. I actually went as far as getting the lens diagram tattooed on my forearm this summer, which is insane, but it had to be done. Yeah.
This lens, I've used it for, I don't know, 14 years maybe. I still use it, but I probably have to buy a new one soon because the wear and tear, it's still pretty nice, but I'd like a backup because it's so good that if it suddenly stopped working, I want to have an extra one in my bag. Whereas if any of my other lenses stopped working, I would just pick another one. But this one is special.
I think probably that first image was, as far as I can remember, it was probably a portrait of one of my kids. And I think that's what this lens does so well, is that it gives you a portrait lens, but it doesn't give you a classic portraiture focal length. So you get a lot of context. It is a 35mm, so you get a lot of the surroundings. And then when you have this beautiful fall off that this lens has and exhibits, then you can actually play around with your compositions and use that blurry, out of focus, beautiful bokeh to tell the story, and you get that context. I have from a very reliable source that the designer of the lens, Takashi Suzuki, actually said that this lens was more about the 3D rendering, that this lens was not made for MTF charts since it was basically a 2D rendering. It was made for shooting 3D objects. So a lot of the engineering power was actually put into the gradual fall off from out of focus to, or from in focus to out of focus. So it's been my most used lens ever since I got it, and to this day I still, whenever I go out, I have it on one of my cameras, always. When this lens was made, it was obviously made for the early X Pro 1 camera. The earliest X Pro 1 camera only had a 16 megapixel sensor. And nowadays the Fujifilm cameras, they all have, or at least some of them has more than 40 megapixels. So how does it actually perform on these cameras? Well, Fujifilm, when they made a list of lenses that were actually able to resolve these new sensors, the xf35 1.4 was not on that list. Yet I've continued using it, and I mean, it might lack some resolution, but it only adds to the character. I mean, I still get nicely resolved images. I would say that it even actually enhances some of the qualities of the lens. The added contrast of the high resolution sensors actually makes it so that the colors get even more vivid. The lens has this incredible golden color cast, especially during summertime, and when you have these warm golden colors, it enhances them quite a lot. And the new high resolution sensors that has more added contrast actually adds to the whole feeling of the lens. So putting it on the newer Fujifilm cameras, actually it benefits from it. And then you also have the added benefit that they actually worked a lot on the autofocus with the lens. It's at the beginning it was painstakingly slow, but I mean, it just meant that I had to work harder for getting the images that I want. It probably slowed down, and it probably was quite good for me to just see scenes instead of just hammering away with fast autofocus. The fact that it actually now can focus faster obviously means that it's usable in more situations, but I still sometimes just like to put it on older cameras and just revisit that feeling that I got from the very beginning back in 2012. I would love to have a weather sealed version of this lens. I wouldn't mind if that meant making it a little bit bigger, but not too much. It's already perfectly balanced on these cameras. The weather sealing would make it a lot more usable, but for the love of God, do not touch the optical formula, because that is where this lens lives.
Absolutely a winner. Nothing ever beat it. What this does is it invites you to a specific distance, and it works really well on different distances. When you shoot portraits, the compression is the thing that guides you with your positioning. And I think that was everything I had to say about this beautiful lens, and I've used it for anything. Sports, portraits, architecture, everything. It does it all. So it's a good lens.
So I think it's inevitable that Fujifilm will revisit this lens at some point. If you ask me, there's not really too many improvements this lens needs, and that's obviously why it's so good. I think in terms of image quality, it is exactly where it needs to be. In terms of build quality as well, but it is also where it gets some criticism from people, and I guess it's mostly people who haven't used it a lot. But the build quality of the lens is nice, but it's only the lack of weather sealing that is really holding it down. To me, I don't really care too much, but it is often what people are pointing out. That is the lack of weather sealing. So I think that's the strongest thing that they could do to sell more of this lens again. And I think they could add weather sealing without sacrificing too much size. And that's another thing, that's the sacrifice. All the ways you can improve this lens, I cannot really see them doing that without sacrificing something. I mean, if they wanna add a faster focusing motor, and another focusing system, they would have to make the lens bigger. If they go with internal focus, they will also have to make the lens bigger. And so I don't really see how they can change the recipe for this lens or the blueprint without sacrificing anything. Obviously, if they can do any of this without sacrificing size, weight, and the image quality, then obviously I'm in for it. But the lens is so good as it is that I don't think I would buy a new one if there is a new one. I'll go with this one until it falls apart, and then I'll consider buying a new one. If they were coming with a new one and I had any sort of say in it, I would say that the tactile external feel of this lens is very like first generation. If they made a new one today, I would love one with a firmer aperture ring, because mine is pretty loose. If they just added the current one with an aperture lock, that would be really nice. The focusing ring as well is very loose on my copy. Now I tried Palle's copy and it's not the same. It's a lot firmer. But he says it's because it's old, where for me it's the opposite. I don't know. Those are things that could get like slightly better. So yeah, it's really like small things that could or should get better.